Welcome back to this new 5-part series on using the PMP libraries with the SharePoint Framework. In today's episode, we're going to look at building a list to support our FAQ web part, and then very quickly using the PMP SP library to read the contents of that web part. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. So, we've installed the development environment and we've created our first web part, but it doesn't seem to do a lot, does it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and open another tab up, and I'm going to create a test list we can use, okay? So if I allow this to load and I go to Site Contents, I'm going to create a new list. I'm going to call it a blank list. I'm going to call it FAQ. And I'll say stores the data for our FAQ web part. There we are, spell that correctly. And I'm going to create that. Now within here, I've got a title. That's quite good. We can use that for the FAQ title. I want to add another column, which is multiple lines of text, which I'm going to call body. And this contains the body of the FAQ. Multiple lines of text we've got in there. That's cool. Let's look at some more things we can use. We could use enriched text. I'm just going to keep it simple for now. I'm going to say yes, it needs to have information in it. I'm going to save that. So we've got that, we've got the body. I'm also going to create a column which tells you what letter to put the FAQ under. So when we develop our FAQs, we're going to have tabs with the different letters on there for people to find. So we're going to allow it to appear under different letters. And I'm going to do a choice in here, and let's call it, we'll call it letter. And we're going to do a choice, and I'm going to get rid of these, and I'm going to add a choice, and this is going to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, you see where I'm going with this, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z, or Z here in England. Let's do that, and I'm going to save that. Now I just want to double check that because I don't think that it set that up correctly. So I'm going to go old school and go into list settings, and I'm going to look at that letter choice in there. I'm going to go through what values, FGH, IJK, no, it didn't store it. A hidden feature of SharePoint maybe. Put in the comments what I did wrong there if you'd like. VW, XYZ. Okay, we've tidied that up a bit. I'm also going to say that this requires information. So, well, let's get out of this classic interface or old school interface, and let's have a look what we've got here. Let's go back to FAQ. So I'm going to put a few bits of information in here. Let's do a new one here, and we're going to call this install Windows 11, and we'll put to install Windows 11, please Google Windows 11. Not very helpful, but I'm going to put it under W for Windows. I'm going to save that one. Okay, and I'm going to put another one under here called uninstall Windows. Again, Google it, but you get the idea. We're going to put some proper FAQs in here as time goes on. And I'm going to put another one just under the letter A. We're going to say Apple products go to apple.com. Again, not a very helpful FAQ, is it? And we could build up lots and lots of these as we will. But we've got a list here. So the idea behind this is going to provide the information for our FAQ web part. And we're going to use PMP SP to read that data. Okay, so let's move on then. So we've got this here, and this is on Robert's Dev Talk, SharePoint.com list FAQ. You would probably have this in your tenancy that you're testing with. So how do we read our list using PMP SP? Well, it's quite a bit of configuration to set up with, but once you've done it once, it will all make perfect sense. Okay, so I'm going to go to the site PMP SP. Here at our friend GitHub, and it's going to tell us how to get started. So the first thing we need to do is install it. Okay, so we're going to go to our project in Visual Studio Code, and we're going to stop that running because we're not testing it at the moment. And I'm going to type that in npm install at pmp/sp --save. So let's run that. Now that's worked. Bear in mind the minimum requirements for this is Node 14, okay, and TypeScript 4 onwards. So yeah, they may be some of the problems you may run into, but let's hope that we don't. So we're going to get started with this. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create some files. So in the latest version of PMP SP, we need to create a configuration file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down into my source folder here, and I'm going to create a new file. Call this file pmp.jsconfig.ts. Okay, so what are we going to type in here? Well, we're going to put the configuration that's going to be reused throughout the whole project, which basically says, here's the context that I'm using, and please use this object to access all of the files in the list. So the first thing we need to add into here is that we need to add a variable, and we're going to call this one _sp. Now, you'll notice it's using this spfi folder, and this can be found in PMP SP. So I'm going to add that in there. Okay, so this file interface for SharePoint is used throughout now the latest version of PMP, which is version 3, and basically it's going to create one object that we can reuse throughout all our web parts. So copying the code from Microsoft example, I'm just going to type that in here. And notice that what it does is we have this function called getSP. So it's going to get this SharePoint context. It gets the current context of the web part, then it uses some other functions from SPFI to build it up. And we're also going to use PMP Logging. Now, I didn't install that in my last step, so we'll install that separately in a moment. So let's have a look at this one. Yeah. We'll add that from web part base. Here we'll update from PMP SP. What about SPFX? It can't find that one. Well, that one is in PMP SP. So let's put that in here. SPFX. Okay, so it's found that pipeline in there as well. But the one thing it can't do is find PMP logging or log level. So how do we get around that? Well, we need to install PNP Logging. So to do that, we need to install PMP Logging, which is npm install at pmp/logging save. And it's going to use this to record any of its errors. All right, so we've got that in there now. So now if I go PMP Logging here, it can't find it at the moment. But what I'm going to do is just click away from that and IntelliSense won't find it yet, but that's not a problem. It's because I forgot to install it in the earlier part. So what we're going to do is just manually add that reference in here by adding an import at the top here. We're going to import log level and PMP logging there in there for us. Okay, so we've got all that set up. Now in the Microsoft example, it asks you to put a few other imports in there just to be used throughout the project. So I'm just going to copy those and put those in there. We've got PMP SP webs, PMP SP lists that we're using, PMP SP items, and batching. Now we may not use all of these, but it's really good. It'll only use what you put in here. So here we want to use access to lists and to webs, so that's great. So we've set that up exactly as we wanted. I wouldn't worry too much about this file, just to say that a configuration file is needed. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to create an interface so that we can read from our list item. Okay, so I'm going to create in here a new file, and I'm going to call this one interfaces.ts. You might have an area where you store all your TypeScript interfaces. I'm putting mine here. So I'm going to export an interface, and I'm going to call this one FAQ, okay, and it's going to have, let's have a look, we're going to have an ID, well, it'll match the one that's on there, that'll be a number. This is so we can read from a list. We're going to have a title, which is a string. We're going to have a body, again that'll be the string, and we're going to have a letter, and that's a string, just to group it by. So this is going, we're going to use this as once we've read our list to have some objects in memory. What I'd also like to do is have a kind of collection of things grouped by letter. Okay, if that makes sense. So for example, I want an object which is going to be the letter A, the letter B, and all the FAQs that belong to them. Maybe we'll cross that bridge as we get to it, but we've got interfaces.ts in here. Okay, so how do we read and display from our list then? Well, let's have a look at that together. Okay, so let's go to our component. Now, the first thing I like to do with my components is I want to convert them into from classes into hooks, basically, or React functions. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do const FAQ equals, and I'm going to do props, FAQ props, and then we'll direct it over here. And I'm going to export default FAQ I'm going to return hello world, and I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff. And now there's some lovely kind of examples of theming and things like that, and we can get to that if we really need to. At the moment, I just want to show the functionality. So at the moment, we're going to do hello world. So now if I run my project, we go back to our site and we refresh it, we've now got hello world. So just to quickly go over what we did there, basically I replaced the existing React class in there with a functional component, and I basically just returned hello world. I have got videos on using hooks, as they call them, in SharePoint. I can put those in the links below. I'll have a search on the Robert's DevTalk site. But basically, we're returning that. So what I want to do here is I want to load the items from our list, and I want to display them just as a list. Okay, so we're going to have a look at all our FAQs just to show how we're going to interface with it. As this project goes on, we're going to use the property controls to pick the list. We're going to view, and then we're going to use some nice accordion controls from PMP to present all the information back in our web part. So for this part, we're just going to have a look at the list items very simply. Okay, so I'm going to set up a way of loading the data when the web part loads. Okay, so at the moment, I want to put in here a variable for my logging so that we can log it out, and I'm going to do constant, and I'm going to call it log source equals FAQ web part, just so if we get any errors, we can log that out. I'm going to put a library name in here for my list. I'm going to put list name. Do you remember we called it FAQ? That's up on our site. There it is, FAQ. Very good. And then I'm going to put a constant, a variable in here. And this variable is basically for the SharePoint file, the PMP object, so that we can talk to it. Okay, so we're using the use effect hook, and this will allow us to run code much like a component on init, really. So use effect, I'm basically going to say here, just run once, okay? And we're going to get our list items from the FAQ list, all right. So let's create the get FAQ items function. So I'm going to put const get FAQ items equals an asynchronous function, because we need to wait for the items to load from the list. And there we are, that's going to do that. So we're going to get these items and we're going to store them within our web part. So I'm going to create an array to hold all this information in. I'm going to use state to store this. So let me put this in here and show you. I'm going to use FAQ items to hold all our list items, and set FAQ items to set these into state. We're going to use our FAQ object that we created before, our interface there, and we're going to store it in here. So to get our items, I'm simply going to get our information from our SharePoint list. And to do this, I've got this line here. I'm going to get the items, and we do it by going to our SP object, which we've got here, and we're going to get the web, meaning the current web, the lists. We get by title our list name FAQ, and we get the items. We're going to log it out and see what happens. And then the final thing we need to do before we do anything is before we do the constructor is we need to set SP, of course. So it's not just enough to say get SP. We need to pass in the context of the web part we're in. So in order to do that, I'm going to have a look at the props here, and I'm going to put context. I'm going to put it as a web part context. Okay. In my web part here, as we're going through to it, I'm going to put the context as this dot context. Okay. So I'm passing the current web part context through to my TSX file. And when I call get SP, I'm going to put in here props.context in there. So I'm going to log this object out and make sure that we've got the context correctly. And then hopefully we should be able to get our items. So let's have a look at this running. Excellent. So we're getting our FAQ items here, and it's going to write those out for us. So excellent. When it runs, we've got our context back, and the FAQ promise has been returned, which is an array of 3 items. If we look at these, we can look through the details. Install Windows 11, and we've got this other one here, uninstall Windows, and as expected, we have our 3rd item, which of course is Apple products, because it's taken it in that order, that default order. What we're going to do later on is we'll make sure it's in the correct sort order. But that's a success. We've managed to get our items back there. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Join us next time, where we're going to explore even further reading these items from the SharePoint list using the PMP SP library, and then displaying them nicely as accordion controls. I'll see you next time.